So yesterday we tried to register business rule with different forms scope, right? So by default, when we create a business rule, we will get all form scope. Okay. So now when I go to any entity, when I click on business rule, when I click new, so I will be getting all forms as a scope. Okay, which means this business rule will work in all of the forms. So now what I have done is I have created two business rules here. In contract form, I have two forms, information form 1, information form 2, and in this contract entity I have created business rule 1, where the business rule 1 is scoped on information 1 form. And what I'm doing, I'm checking the condition. What I'm checking, owner contains data, then contract start date is 10th October. It's not 10th October, it's 1st October. Okay. What is another business rule? This one, which I mark scope to information 2, which is setting contract end date. The business rule 1 is setting contract start date, business rule 2 setting contract end date. Okay. Business rule 1 is on information form 1, business rule 2 is on information form 2. So let's go back here. When I refresh, when I click new in information form 1, you see contract start date is populated as October 1st. When I change this form to information 2, contract end date is populated, right? Information form, the business rule setting the contract start date only, because the business rule scope is set to information form 1. When I change the form, business rule 2 is registered on this form. The business rule 2 is setting contract end date. Okay. Now what we will do, we will see another difference. Okay. So we have seen scope, individual form. What is individual form? Information form 1 or information form 2. Just a second, please. Yeah, sorry. So individual form means that business rule will work in that individual form. Then we have all forms. What is all forms? Business rule will work in all forms. All forms means it will execute in main form plus quick create form plus part form. There is another business rule scope. So when I click new here, what I'm getting? Entity scope. So we have another scope called entity. So what is entity scope? Entity scope. So entity will also, business rule will work in all these forms. All forms will execute the business rule in all forms. Entity also will execute in all forms. But what is the difference? runs on client side, it will run on server side. What it is mean, we'll see. Okay, so now I will create first all forms condition. What is the condition? Owner contains data. Okay, this is my condition. Then otherwise here entity field is contract type does not contain data, then throw error message. Contract type, please fill contract type. Condition contract type does not contain data, then it will throw the error. Now it's set to all forms. Save. Activate. Activate. Now let's refresh. See, I'm getting this error in contract type. Please fill contract type. I'm getting in information form 2, as well as when I switch to information form 1, it is giving this same error. Okay, because we have set the business rule scope to all forms. Now, shall I save the data without giving this field? Just when I click save, does it allow? No, right? Because it is a mandatory. Now, what I will do, I will import the data. Okay, so I won't create the data. I will go here, new, Excel. So, contract data. I will just give the contract name. Contract name. HP. Lenovo. I'm just importing these three records. So what I will do, I will save this as save file want to save it as. We'll try to import this file. So under settings, under data management, I'm importing the data. So what will happen when I import? Records will create. I will import the data, choose file, contract data. Next, invalid format. We need to change it to CSV. Where we have this. Copy. Here. Anyone save as? We have. So now I am formatting this to CSV. Okay, now let's check. This is my CSV file. So here I need to select in which entity I need to upload the data. So contract. We have to contract. Let's see. This is not the one. Contract name with contract name should map with contract name. Okay, I'm mapping name field. Name field is this name field with in CSV. I have the header contract name. Okay, clear? What I'm doing, contract name from Excel, I'm mapping this data in name field in CRM, this name field. Okay, now let's see. Next, submit. Finish. Total three records that are processing for the import. Three success. Let's go back to contract entity. You can see these three records are imported. But as soon as I open, I'm getting this validation error. Clear? Why it is not restricted? Contract type is null, and we have a business rule to throw the error if the contract type is null, right? Now, for the same business rule, I will deactivate. Okay, I will set this to entity. Same business rule. I'm not changing anything. I'm just changing the scope. Now it is activated. Now what I will do, I will change this name because these are already created. I will go. These are the three. So I will click on file, save as. Okay, it's CSV. Yes, I'm existing, replacing this data. So as you see here, what I have in CSV, this. Now I will upload. Go back to CRM, refresh this also. Now I will import the data, choose this file, next, 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 in which entity we need to select contract, contract, right? Next, use the mapping contract name, click on next, next, and submit. Now this is completed one, this is the recent one that is submitted. Here also three records are processing. You see three errors. If I open this file, import that we are doing, and go to failures because all our records are failed. You see description is this, aborted, import record. Okay, so what it is giving, please fill contract type. Where this data is coming, this error is coming from business rule. Why the business rule is not triggered when we set the scope to all forms? Why the business rule is triggered when we set the scope to entity? That is, all forms will run at client side. Client side means when we manually go to contract and click on new and work, right? In the when we log in into CRM manually and access the entity, then the client side business rule will execute and server side also will execute. But when you are importing the data or when the data is coming from some external system through integration, in that cases your business rule with scope all forms will not work. Okay, only your business rule with scope entity will work because this business rule will run at server side. Why this will not work? Because data is importing in the server, but my business rule scope is set to all form which runs on the client side. Here entity means it will execute on the server side whenever any data is manually creating from CRM, or if we are importing the data, or if the data is coming from some external system through integration. In all this scenario, the business rule with entity will execute. You will get this question in interview. What is the difference between all forms and entity? Both will execute in all forms. This also will execute on all forms. Entity scope business rule will also execute in all forms. But only the difference is all form business rule will execute on your client side. Means when you log in, when you create the record, when you update the record, then only your all forms business rule will work. When your entity will work, it will work when we do manually. Also, this business rule will execute if the data is importing, if the data is coming from external system through integration, this business rule will execute. Now you saw on live example, I have initially created a business rule scope to all forms and then imported this data. Then three records are succeeded. Three records were created. Now the same business rule, I changed the scope to all form from all forms to entity, and then I imported another data. There I am getting the error. What is the error? Whatever error that we are throwing in the business rule, we are getting. Why the business rule is executed? Why during the data input? Because the business rule scope is entity. Clear? Any questions? Let me know. Anybody have any questions?